The doorbell rang at 7:12 p.m. and my stomach dropped like a stone because I recognized the knock, 3 quick taps, pause, 2 more. Exactly the way Sarah used to signal me from the hallway when we were dating and her roommate was asleep. I stood in the kitchen holding a half-empty bottle of Prosecco, watching her hurry past me in that emerald dress that still fit her like the day I proposed, and she didn't even glance back to see if I was following. She opened the door and there he was, Ethan, 6'3" of easy confidence, and that same crooked smile that used to make her laugh until she snorted in college photos I deleted from my phone years ago. He stepped inside carrying a bottle of red wine and a bouquet of white roses, her favorite, and she hugged him so tightly her cheek pressed against his collarbone for 3 full seconds while I stood there like an idiot, wondering why my own house suddenly felt like someone else's stage. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. And it wasn't the hug. It was the way she pulled back, looked up at him and said, "You came." In this breathy voice I hadn't heard since our honeymoon in Santorini when she whispered it against my neck at 3 a.m. while the sea crashed outside. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, polite and unreadable, and he extended his hand. "You must be Mark," he said, like we'd never met, even though Sarah had shown me pictures of them at graduation, arms slung around each other, both of them sunburned and grinning. I shook his hand because what else could I do? My palm was damp, his was dry and strong, and Sarah laughed this nervous little trill and said, "Mark, this is Ethan, my Ethan from undergrad, remember? My Ethan." The words landed between us like a live wire. The party was supposed to be our fresh start. We'd closed on the house 3 weeks earlier, a fixer-upper with creaky hardwood floors and a backyard big enough for the dog we kept saying we'd adopt once the renovations were done. I'd spent the day hanging string lights and arranging charcuterie boards while Sarah disappeared to run errands for 4 hours. When she came back, her hair was freshly blown out, and she smelled like that vanilla perfume she only wore on date nights. I kissed her cheek and tasted setting spray. Our friends trickled in, Jake from accounting, his wife Priya, my sister Lauren who kept shooting me concerned glances because she could tell I was off. But the whole night, Sarah orbited Ethan like he was the sun and the rest of us were just planets caught in his gravity. I tried to play host. I refilled glasses, laughed at jokes I didn't hear, took selfies with people whose names I'd forget by morning. But every time I looked for Sarah, she was touching Ethan's arm or leaning in to hear something he whispered, her hand lingering on his wrist. At one point I caught them in the hallway outside the bathroom, heads bent together, and she was saying, "I never stopped wondering what would have happened if..." The sentence trailed off when she saw me, but the damage was done. Ethan straightened up, gave me that same polite nod and said, "Great spread, man." Like we were colleagues at a conference, not a guy standing in my house with his fingers inches from my wife's waist. The truth didn't hit me all at once. It crept in through the cracks, slow and poisonous. There was the way Sarah's phone buzzed constantly on the counter, face down, and when I flipped it over out of habit she snatched it away so fast the screen cracked against the granite. There was the late-night work calls, that left her flushed and distracted, coming to bed hours after me with excuses about client deadlines that didn't add up because I knew her boss, Greg, and he was golfing in Scottsdale all week. There was the drawer in her nightstand I opened looking for Advil and found instead a silver bracelet I'd never seen. Delicate links with a tiny engraved E that caught the light when I held it up. She gasped when I asked about it, said it was a gift from her mom, but her mom had been dead for 6 years and hated silver because it tarnished. I started cataloging the lies like evidence in a trial I hadn't agreed to prosecute. The gym membership she never used but paid for monthly. The password change on her laptop the week after we moved in. The way she stopped saying "I love you" first, waiting for me to say it so she could echo it back like a courtesy. I told myself I was paranoid, that 8 years of marriage didn't dissolve over a college ex and some weird vibes at a housewarming. But then I remembered the night 2 weeks earlier when I woke up at 2 a.m. and she wasn't beside me. I found her in the dark living room, curled on the couch with her phone glowing against her face, tears streaking her cheeks as she typed furiously. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "Just a fight with Lauren." But Lauren was asleep upstairs and had been for hours. The party reached its peak around 10:30. Someone put on old throwback music. Usher, because of course. And people started dancing in the living room we hadn't finished painting yet. Sarah grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him into the center of the makeshift dance floor, laughing like she used to laugh with me when we were broke college kids stealing fries off each other's plates. I watched from the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel I'd been using to wipe up spilled Merlot, and something inside me cracked open. Not anger, not yet. Just this hollow, echoing realization that the life I'd built, the late nights sanding baseboards, the savings account drained for granite countertops, the future dog with a name we hadn't picked yet, was all constructed on sand. I don't know what possessed me to walk over. Maybe it was the Prosecco. Maybe it was the way Ethan's hand settled on the small of her back exactly where mine used to rest. I tapped her shoulder and she spun around, eyes bright with champagne and something else I couldn't name. "Dance with me," I said, but it came out flat. She hesitated just a fraction of a second, but Ethan stepped back with that easy grace and said, "She's all yours, man. All yours." The phrase echoed in my skull like a gunshot. We swayed awkwardly to a song that used to be ours, Lucky by Jason Mraz, because apparently the universe has a sense of humor. Sarah's hands were on my shoulders but her eyes kept drifting to Ethan leaning against the wall, sipping his wine and watching us with this half-smile that made me want to punch through drywall. I leaned in close to her ear and whispered, "What's going on with you two?" She stiffened, pulled back just enough to look at me with those green eyes that used to make me forget my own name. "Nothing," she said. "He's just an old friend." But her voice cracked on the word friend, and I felt the lie settle between us like a third person in the dance. The song ended and someone yelled for a toast. I found myself holding the Prosecco bottle, standing on a chair like an idiot, while 30 people raised their glasses to our new home. Sarah stood beside Ethan, her shoulder brushing his, and when I looked down at them I saw it clear as day. The way she leaned into him, the way his fingers grazed her hip when he thought no one was watching. I opened my mouth to say something about new beginnings, about love and hard work and the life we'd promised each other, but the words died in my throat. Instead I said, "To Sarah and Ethan, may they find whatever it is they're looking for." The room went quiet. Someone laughed nervously. Sarah's face drained of color. I stepped down from the chair, set the bottle on the table, and walked through the crowd to where they stood. Ethan looked confused, Sarah looked terrified. I took her hand, the hand I'd held through 2 miscarriages, through her father's funeral, through every fight and makeup and ordinary Tuesday, and placed it gently in Ethan's. "Take care of her," I said, and my voice didn't even shake. Then I looked at Sarah. Really looked at her for the first time in months, and saw the truth written all over her face. Guilt, relief, love for someone else wearing my ring. I kissed her forehead, tasting salt from the tears she hadn't let fall yet, and walked out the front door without my coat even though it was October and the air bit like betrayal. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching the party lights flicker through the windows, listening to muffled music and laughter that didn't include me anymore. My phone buzzed with texts. Jake asking if I was okay. Lauren demanding to know what happened. Sarah's name flashing over and over with messages I didn't read. I drove to the motel off Highway 12. The one with the flickering neon sign and the ice machine that sounded like a dying animal. Checked in with cash because I couldn't bear the thought of her seeing the charge. Lay on the lumpy bed fully clothed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like the shape of our old apartment. The one we'd left behind for this house, this life, this lie. The next morning I went back for my things while she was at yoga. Found the divorce papers already printed on the kitchen counter. Her signature shaky but there. Next to a note that said, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I love you but I'm not in love with you anymore." The cliché of it almost made me laugh. I took my tools, my clothes, the photo of us at Niagara Falls where she's wearing my hoodie and looking at me like I hung the moon. Left my key on the counter next to her note and wrote underneath in Sharpie, "The house looks great. Enjoy the string lights." I moved into a studio apartment above a bakery that smells like cinnamon at 5 a.m., and learned how to sleep diagonally across a bed meant for one. Some nights I still wake up reaching for her side, fingers closing on cold sheets. I kept the bracelet with the E. Wear it on a chain under my shirt like a scar I can't pick off. Lauren says I should hate her, Jake says I dodged a bullet, but the truth is more complicated. Sarah wasn't evil. She was just human, and humans get tired of pretending. We built something beautiful, and then let it rot from the inside because neither of us knew how to say we were unhappy until someone else came along and made it easy. Sometimes I drive past the house at night. The string lights are still up, glowing soft and golden through the trees. I wonder if Ethan waters the herbs we planted together, if he knows she likes her coffee with oat milk now, if he's learned the exact pressure to rub the knot between her shoulder blades when she's stressed. I wonder if she ever thinks about the way I used to trace constellations on her back while we fell asleep, connecting freckles into stories only we knew. Love isn't a lightning strike. It's a slow erosion, a quiet unraveling you don't notice until you're standing in the wreckage holding pieces that don't fit anymore. I gave her away with my own hand because keeping her would have meant keeping the lie, and I loved her too much for that. The bravest thing I ever did was walk out that door knowing I'd never stop loving the woman who stopped loving me back. Some nights that truth keeps me awake. Other nights it's the only thing that lets me sleep. I still flinch when I hear our song in grocery stores. Still check my phone at 2 a.m. expecting a text that will never come. But I'm learning that leaving isn't the same as losing. Sometimes the greatest act of love is releasing someone to the life they chose without you. I shook his hand, gave her away, and walked out forever. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about the man I needed to become without her. The house was never the home. We were. And when we stopped being that, the lights went out one by one until only the truth was left glowing in the dark.